Hello and welcome to a very sad episode of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by MMO's Chris Bello. Chris, thanks for coming on. Wish it was under better circumstances, but the collapse is complete. Gary Cohen said it best: in an expanded postseason, with the talent on this roster, somehow the 2025 Mets avoided the postseason. It was a 3.5-month slide that seemed to just be mounted by just horrible starting pitching. I just want to get your initial reactions to all this and see how you're feeling now after a day to digest.
Yeah, I'm only smiling because I feel like I'm apathetic about it. Personally, I lived through 07, 08, so I saw it happen. I was a little kid when it happened, 7, 8 years old, so definitely kind of rolled out the next day and it was okay. But this one is really settling in now. And it's a little weird talking about it, especially where we're from. A lot of Yankees fans. I'm from Connecticut, so a lot of Red Sox fans talking about postseason, and it feels a little weird not to be a part of those talks.
Yeah, it feels very weird since up until a week ago, whatever it was, they had the last time they didn't hold the playoff spot was like April 5th. So, just everything that happened last year, the run they went on, bringing in Juan Soto, the expectations were sky high. You bring Alonso back. We'll get into it, but it makes me think where this team would have been without Alonso and Soto. They would have been really, really bad. We'll talk about it, but just an incredible failure, a team-wide failure. Some incredible individual performances this year. Crazy to think with the years that Alonso and Soto had, the Mets would miss the playoffs. But something that I was worried about going into the year as far as just not having enough quality arms to last the year seemed to really rear its ugly head the last 3 months of the year. And here we are, Mets outside looking in. And what's a bad year, the Yankees make the playoffs and almost win their division, so that's annoying. Red Sox trade their best player and then become like the best team in the AL after that. It would be nice if the Mets ran into some dumb luck every once in a while like that. I mean, I guess they got hot last year. But with again the talent they had on this roster this year, it's just a complete failure all around. There's no way around it.
It was almost like everything went wrong, like everything and anything that could go wrong. Even if you go back and if you watch the Stearns presser for everybody at home, and they talked about, would you have done this differently at the deadline? Would you have added this? Would you have given up, a Nolan McLean maybe, or this piece? If you go back and you look at July, and they were still in a playoff spot, they were even still the top wild card and led their division at one point in July. You had Tyler McGill coming back. You had Sean Manaea coming back. Frankie Montas, albeit looking really bad, had come back. And you had a plethora of arms. We were even discussing, Sal, at one point, maybe the Mets dip into their starting pitching depth and go get somebody offensively. And everyone got hurt. And on top of everybody getting hurt, the offense, it never seemed like it clicked until the starting pitching was just gone. So despite all that, they won 83 games. So it's going to be a weird offseason to evaluate everything and everybody on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, right? It just seems like in general, this team this year never clicked on all cylinders at the same time, pitching and hitting, any of that. And the second half last year, you had both firing on all cylinders. So that was tough to see. I mean, in the beginning of this year, the first half, I should say, the pitching really carried the team. The offense wasn't clicking. And like you mentioned, the offense started to click once the pitching sputtered. And at that point, it just sputtered too much. I don't fault anything from the deadline. I think they, on paper, had a good deadline. It's just one of those things where you don't have a magic 8 ball. You don't know who's going to be hot and who's not. Unfortunately, the Mets got a guy like Helsley who was just horrible. That they were hoping would be a high leverage guy, and he just wasn't good. And a team like Philadelphia, in Duran, and then also a guy like Harrison Bader they traded for that doesn't seem like a big deal at the time, is really hot and especially kills the Mets. So, you don't have a magic 8 ball there. It is what it is. They just didn't have that kind of luck. And even the same thing with Mendoza. It feels like a lot of the moves he made last year when he was clicking the right buttons, this year he didn't have as much of a feel. It feels like everything he tried to do was kind of a little bit too late or kind of the wrong move. And, obviously you talked about Stearns' presser. He already said Mendoza's coming back. I know some people thought maybe there would be someone on the chopping block for this to take the blame, and it wasn't going to be the owner or the general manager. But someone who was a finalist for Manager of the Year last year, obviously, I think you got to give a little bit longer of a leash. I'm happily, I guess, surprised a little bit that they're not too hasty on that, on letting Mendoza go. I think you got to give him a little bit longer to see. But expectations are here. What they do in the offseason, I don't know. We'll talk about that. But it's just it's a real reality check, a real gut check, and I'm sure for Steve Cohen too, who tweeted out just basically, this is unacceptable. We apologize to the fans who did their part in showing out this year and spending their money and coming to support the team, and the Mets just kind of didn't do it on their end.
Not only did they support the team, go look at the Miami series, the last 3 games of the year. There was 30,000 people in Miami, and sure, they're probably at the Jets game being, disappointed again right now playing the Dolphins, but they showed up the whole year, including a lot of us at MMO who went to games and just supported this team. And I think when you look at the coaching staff in particular, which we just brought up, it's really easy after the year to just say, fire Mendoza, fire the president of baseball operations. But at what point during the season was Carlos Mendoza set up to succeed? It was almost eerily similar to the beginning of 2024, but the entire year. All of last year, the pitching was bad up until July, but then Manaea started going 7 innings. Luis Severino started going 7, 8 innings a game. And the pitching started to click, but this year it never got to a good run of everybody clicking at the same time. And I don't think it's fair, especially after this season, and especially after 2024 Carlos Mendoza had, to just throw him out into the gutter. Because like you said, you can't really evaluate what kind of job he did based on a season where if a starter went 5 innings in the last 3 months of the season, we were pumping our fists. So I think it's difficult to just say get rid of Mendoza.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. Talk about just 180s. Like the name that comes to mind is David Peterson. I mean, first half to second half, obviously he was an all-star in the first half, and the second half, his last dozen starts, it's just a total tank. It feels like obviously he's pitched 2 good halves between last year when he came back and the first half of this year, but it's can he put a full season of good 25 plus starts together? And you don't know that. You mentioned as far as last year, guys like Severino and Manaea giving you 6, 7 innings every single night. It felt like starting staff. Stearns did what he did last year. He bought low and with potential high ceilings. It didn't work out this year. Frankie Montas will never see you pitch again for the Mets. He's going to earn his paycheck while rehabbing after Tommy John surgery. And Manaea, I don't know now what you're getting there, right? Someone who had a really good second half and got himself, a nice little contract. But, I don't know what to make of this year, too, because he was hurt for 3/4 of the year as well. So I don't know how to evaluate that moving forward. I just have a feeling with a lockout looming after next year and probably a salary cap coming, that whether David Stearns likes it or not, I think from the top, they're going to say you're going to have to get a horse. You're going to have to overpay for a top tier starting pitcher, someone who is a stopper and can take the ball every 5th day and give your team a good chance to win. I know Scooble's not up after this year. I think he's up after next year. I don't know who that guy is. Do you call the Pittsburgh Pirates and say, what do you want? Here we have the best farm system in baseball. We're going to do a sign and trade. So you bring him right in for Paul Skeens. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I think in regards to the pitching, I think Stearns is going to be uncomfortable because I think that Cohen is going to make him spend more than he's typically willing to do with starting pitching free agents.
Well, it's tough because Joe Ryan is the name that comes up to me, the guy who wasn't moved at the deadline by the Twins. Sure. And if not him, maybe Mitch Keller with the Pirates if it's not Skeens. And when you go back in hindsight, it's always 2020. If you go back 2 years ago when we were talking about, would you move a Jet Williams for Garrett Crochet? Would you move a Brandon Sproat for Garrett Crochet? Well, this is, look at what the Red Sox are doing right now. Yep. 189 games, I believe. They're going to Yankee Stadium. They're going to be in that wild card series, despite, like you mentioned earlier, no Devers. Bregman missed a couple of months. Roman Anthony hasn't played in September. Yet every 5th day, you're winning a game. So, yeah, it'd be nice to have somebody like that. And kind of what you alluded to, I don't know who that guy is. And, I don't know if you've looked at the free agents that are going to be in the starting pitching realm, they're not good. There are not a lot of
Right.
names there. So
Which
it's
is
Zach
why I
Gallen
mentioned
maybe.
Skeens. Yeah, and I don't see Zach Gallen pitching too long, into his 30s or anything like that. He's kind of seemed to fallen off after, a good couple of years with the Diamondbacks, but I don't know. And again, to get a guy like Skeens, it's going to be a king's ransom. But to your point, when you got a guy every fifth day, that's going to probably give you a chance to win, and a good chance at that. I don't think the Mets can afford to do so with this kind of core now. That's even, you don't have to pay Skeens right away. You probably want to, but he's a young player that if you want to, take advantage of, you're going to have to, and we'll talk about it, you're going to have to repay Alonso now. He's opted out. He's going to get a long-term contract, and I would assume that's going to be another player that Steve Cohen says, I don't really care. I need him back. There's certain players that just fit teams, fit cities, metrics aside. Alonso's one of those players. So we'll see what the market kind of dictates now that he bet on himself again and had a good year. And we don't know what Edwin Diaz is going to do. He has an opt-out. We don't know if he's going to exercise it or not. Phenomenal year. Has really bounced back from that knee injury. Making a lot of money, though. I don't know if, if he tested again, if he's going to get that same kind of money. So maybe he won't. And comfortability, that sort of, his family seems to really be comfortable in that sort of deal with the Mets. So we'll see. But just as again, going to be a bunch of question marks here. And, obviously Juan Soto's great. We'll talk about his individual season. But you had career years from guys like Soto and Alonso, and you missed the playoffs. So obviously that means that it's, going to take a lot more than just those two kind of monsters in the front if you can keep them together.
Yeah, and we are talking a lot about the rotation, and I can't take credit for this stat. This is from, the great Evan Roberts at The Fan. But this offense scored 2 less runs this season than they did last year. And they added Juan Soto. And they brought back Pete Alonso off of a down year. So if you go and you try and replace Alonso in the aggregate, if you go and get like a Josh Naylor, if you go and, try and put Vientos at first base, what does this offense look like? And again, a lot of that's because we were talking about in July that they were down in the dumps with the White Sox with hitting and runners in scoring position. Sure. So a lot of it could, bounce back, and it could be the offense that we saw in 24 and 22. But there's a lot to look at this roster and say, these guys don't fit her. Maybe I have to move this guy to bring in somebody from AAA. So I think that was pretty apparent in the David Stearns presser, where he was trying to say basically, look, it's a long off season. The season ended yesterday, and we're going to have to look at everything. We're going to have to look at the coaching staff. We're going to have to look at the roster. I mean, one thing that comes to mind immediately is what happens with Beatty, Vientos, and Mauricio. Those 3 do not fit on this roster. And you have Jet Williams coming up. So I don't know what happens there. You don't know what happens in the outfield. Is Soto a DH? Is he not a DH? Is Tyrone Taylor your full-time center fielder? Francisco Alvarez is having surgery in the next few days. So there's a lot going on in Mets land right now. And it's gonna take a lot to figure out what's gonna look like in 26.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. Add to the fact that, Francisco Lindor, obviously we know he plays every day, and when he's on, he's on. But we could say at this point that he is a very streaky player. When the highs are high, especially offensively, they're great, but the valleys are low. And he goes through these prolonged periods where he's either real hot or he's not doing anything. And at this point this year, too, his defense felt like it took a step back. I think I would say that about the Mets in general this year. Did not pitch well, did not play good defense. And that doesn't bode well typically. And the Mets did both of those things well last year. Obviously he's still your shortstop over the next few seasons. I'm not saying anything like that. But the arm strength has never really been a strong point to him. And it just feels like he's made a lot of easier errors this year than you've seen in the past. I'd like to see, I know his motto is be consistent. I'm going to need to see a little bit more of that offensively and hopefully clean up those kind of soft errors that we saw that we normally haven't seen over the last few years from him.
I really wonder how much of that was the toe. And Francisco Lindor is such a grinder that I don't think he would ever say, well, it was my toe, and that's why I couldn't get to those balls this year. But you saw it when they went to Colorado when he got hit in the toe in Los Angeles earlier in the year. Didn't play, came off the bench, won them one of the games to lead to a sweep. Right. And then it seemed like he wasn't existent in that lineup for the next 2.5 months, where it was just like, whoa, like we have to move him off of the leadoff spot for a little bit. And then he ended up earning his way back there. So I do wonder how much of that is the toe. I wonder if he comes back next year and he has that MVP pace where he had an OPS that started with a 9. And I
Right.
believe he had 7 or 8 homers in April. I mean, he got off to a fast start this year, and it just got totally derailed. So it's just another mystery that you could chalk up to 2025, where you don't really know how to evaluate a player's year.
Yeah, and you mentioned got the trio of Beatty, Vientos, and Mauricio. You don't really know how they fit. Alvarez, I don't know how he kind of fits. I don't know long term if he's a catcher. I don't know that, and then that kind of clogs things. And you got more than you're going to have 2 or 3 DHs. That also depends if you bring Alonso back too, because I'm talking about Soto in that regard. Juan Soto may be your first baseman. I don't know if people are talking about that a lot, but you're paying him a lot of money. He's not like he's a Gold Glover in the outfield. I mean, he was a finalist, I think, with the Yankees last year, but that was for offense. If that makes sense, there's some guys out this year, but I don't know. Like you said, things are kind of clogged up a bit there. I don't know like what the point is, and it's just I don't like to give up on young guys as far as the Alvarez, the Mauricios, the Beatties, because they're cheap more than anything. It offsets some of these guys you're paying a lot of money to. But if they're not fitting, I think at this point you have to explore being able to pull the trigger on some trades, possibly to bring in players that kind of fit the roster better. To your point.
Well, I've got a good one that I've already been sitting on for a while. If you do want to bring back Pete Alonso and make him your full-time DH, I know based off reports the Mets brass were in love with Cody Bellinger. Bring him in, put him at first base.
Sure.
You could play him there. Put Juan Soto in right, and now you have a deeper lineup and you have a good defensive first baseman. But again, like that's what David Stearns kind of mentioned and alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what's going to happen. And I think based off what he said, we're going to find out if guys like Jeremy Hefner, Eric Chavez, Jeremy Barnes, they're going to make those decisions in the next 2 weeks. So we'll know after that kind of which way they want to go.
Sure. Real quick, we got to talk Soto's first year. I know we've alluded to him here now. Obviously, they get off to the fastest of starts, but from June on, he was the best hitter in baseball. Got a lot better at runners in scoring position, started hitting home runs with runners on base. We know what he did the first couple months of the year, but turned into what's probably going to be a top 5 MVP, season in the NL. Would probably be a little higher if they didn't choke the stupid playoffs. But 43 home runs, almost 40 stolen bases, a 900 plus OPS, 30 doubles, I believe. I mean, that's a pretty good first year for someone who got a lot of money. I don't know what much else you could say about that. It was not a player like him slumping or anything like that caused this Mets downslide for the most part.
No, he had a great September as well. The last 2 series were a little rough, of course. A lot of people are going to remember that double play from game 162. But yeah, 43 homers. You can't really complain about that. No one saw 38 stolen bases. So it was an overall great first season. I thought it was interesting because I think he was getting a little flack for the runners in scoring position earlier. And I was a little surprised when there was somebody on first base this year. He did hit 216. And I'm not trying to nitpick somebody, but it was almost a year where you're going to go back and look at Baseball Reference in 5 years and you're going to go, wow, that was a great year. But coming off of the year, when you look at how he performed with runners on base, 31 of his 43 homers were solo homers.
Yep.
You're going to slap a solid A on that year, but you left the year desiring more from a guy who is supposed to lead your offense. Again, scored 2 less runs than they did last year, and you expect a team of Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, and then whoever else is behind them to be a top 5 offense in the National League, and they just simply weren't.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I can't really argue that. The point with solo home runs, that was crazy, and it did feel like the first couple months with runs was great. It felt like he was used to playing at Yankee Stadium for a season, trying to hit the ball in the air out of the ballpark a little bit more than normal. And he seemed to, once from June on, kind of settle in and become the player that you're more accustomed to, with just trying to drive runners in with runners on, taking what's pitched to you, that sort of thing. So I do agree that, you'll look back and say it was a great year, but if you look at a little bit more, you'll see, there was kind of some things to be desired, but you really can't complain overall. This was a team-wide failure. It's nothing he did. His numbers are there to back that. But, that I don't know how much more that we could talk about as far as just kind of everything that went on in this collapse. And I hate to end the show like this, but I mean, I guess we should just do World Series predictions. Obviously, the Mets are not in it, but I want to wrap things up with who you kind of think is, going to be winning the whole thing here. It's at least this year is very balanced. There's not one team I think that runs away or you think can run away with it, which is good for the sport. So, just wish the Mets were one of them.
Yeah. And it's sad because even though the resume didn't say it because they were 0-70 after trailing the 8th inning, you really did think that if Juan Soto and even Nolan McLean, who, my God, we could do a whole hour podcast on how awesome he is. Nolan McLean, Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor in the playoffs. I'm taking because I'm biased, but yeah, I got the Mets fans' worst nightmare in the World Series. I have the Yankees and the Phillies, and I think the Phillies win the World Series this year.
Wow.
Unfortunate.
Oh, man. Well, it's very even. I'm not going to pick the Yankees because I don't want to do that. I think the Mariners are really hot. I'm going to go with the Mariners in the AL. And you know what? In the surprise move, give me the Padres in the World Series, and I'll take the Mariners winning the whole thing. And I'll take the Mariners winning the whole thing.
You got the Eddie Vedder Cup World Series, by the way. I don't know if you know anything about that lore. That is the annual Eddie Vedder series. The man born in San Diego. They do. That's what they call it there.
That's
the
funny.
Man born in San Diego, but became famous in Seattle. I like that from you.
There you go. I mean, you know what? Historically, not great teams. Better over the last few years. Mariners. I feel like the Mariners are the Mets from last year. Just the second half, they've been super, super hot. That's this tournament now. It's if the hottest teams that get in and enter, exiting the regular season seem to do the best. I don't know. We'll see. And for the Phillies, no Wheeler's huge. I think if they still had Zach Wheeler at the top, I'd be probably a little more bullish on them, but that's a huge loss. And we'll see. We'll see. Baseball's in a good spot. It's in a good spot. It's exciting. Like I said, there's no one team this year that you'd say has run away with it. So it should be an exciting postseason. Hopefully the Mets get there again one day in my life. That would be great. We'll see. Nice. But for now, we'll stand by. We'll watch these teams and we'll just see what the winter brings. So that'll wrap it up this week. Great season. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And as always, no matter how hard it gets, let's go Mets.